All right, welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I am John. It is time for another Motorweek retro review reaction. So, my friend, please pull up a chair, grab your beverage of choice, and this week we're going to do the 1984 Chevy Caprice Classic. Now, I'll warn you up front, I'm probably not going to be super positive about this car because I thought about this before I started to record, right? And I do not watch these in advance, so I don't know what they're going to say, but I don't like this car. And it's not a strong hatred, but I think in kind of thinking it through and its place in history, I've come maybe around to liking it. I'm really curious to see what they say here. Keep in mind that if you've been a fan of the channel, you know that my first car was a 76 Regal. My third car was an 83, I think it was, Regal. So I'm more of a mid-sized car guy. And I don't know that, certainly I never drove one of these, but I don't know that I've ever ridden in one. But part of me is, I just don't get it. I mean, this is a front engine, body on frame, rear wheel drive, slow, heavy, ponderous, throwback to the 70s and the 60s way of designing cars. It strikes me as horribly efficient, and I know there's a lot of affection out there, and certainly people who lived through the 80s, the move to unibody and front wheel drive, missing these kind of cars. And I do agree, you should have the ability to buy something like this if you want it, but I guess I never quite got it. Now, part of this is these are big, and I'm always kind of more of a mid-sized guy. I have some experience with these in the Buicks. And that's the other half of why I think I'm not going to like this car, because why, if you're average, middle-class, income earner, why? There's more efficient, more fuel-efficient cars, more space-efficient cars out there. These, to me, say more premium luxury based on the size. But as I've been thinking about that and kind of where I felt about this car, I may change my opinion by the end. So let's see what they say.
Motorweek is made possible by Lucas Oil and TireRack.com.
Motorweek, television's automotive magazine, with your host, John Davis.
Hello, and welcome again to Motorweek. You know, some cars just never die. They don't even fade away, particularly when there's no current oil shortage to make people nervous about gas mileage. For proof, there's our first road test subject, the old and still new Chevrolet Caprice Classic. After that, something definitely new from Japan's Isuzu, their sexy little sports coupe, the Impulse. Pat Goss will have some new maintenance advice, and Joyce Braga has the latest on a sizzling new version of the Audi Quattro. But now, as for this old new version of the Chevy Caprice Classic, this big family sedan is definitely holding its own in the market, and this at a time when most cars seem to shrink each time a new design is introduced. It seems that downsizing has become a national epidemic, and this poses a problem for the big family. They just can't fit into the incredible shrinking car. But some big cars are still hanging in there. In fact, some of them are selling better than they have in years. Witness our ever-popular family sedan up next.
So, interesting, because they kind of hit on a couple things there. First off, you got to keep in mind, we're through the two oil crises of the 70s, the recession, and the world was turning back up. So, you know, there's a time period there in the 70s, early 80s maybe, where people started downsizing. People started buying the small Japanese ultra fuel efficient cars. But once the economy kind of normalized, they went right back to these big, heavy cars. So that's what they're talking about in terms of the sales. But I do think that's a misrepresentation of the ever downsizing epidemic, that's pretty funny, of cars. But the unibody cars with front wheel drive, transverse engines, things like that, were much more space efficient. And it was one of the big selling points, is that you could have a smaller overall car, a lighter car, a more fuel efficient car, but have the same interior space. Some of that's marketing speak, I get that, but I think that's a little unfair of them.
This car is a member of the third best-selling lineup in the U.S. for the 1983 model year. It's definitely not a compact. It's not even an intermediate. It's the full-size 116-inch wheelbase, 17.5-foot long, 6-passenger, rear-drive Chevrolet Caprice Classic, a real throwback.
If you're an American and you're a fan of American cars, those stats, there's some pride there, isn't there?
But in fact, sales of the Caprice and the base Impala have done so well of late that for 1984, GM has brought back the two-door coupe. That one was discontinued only 1 year ago. Along with an 8-passenger wagon and our test 4-door, it provides a full array of affordable big family cars. But since size is relative, so is that word affordable. Cost for the standard Chevrolet begins at $8,500, with our loaded Classic at $13,000. But similar size cars of more upmarket makes are thousands more. And for those conservationists who find it deplorable that any big motor car is still at large, take heed. Our Caprice with a 5-liter V8 and a 4-speed overdrive automatic transmission is rated by the EPA at 17 miles per gallon city and 28 highway.
Okay, so let's jump into a bunch of different things here, right? First off, styling. It's boring and generic to the point of being generic, right? This is literally, you could just draw and car, right? And this is what it would look like. But it ends up being pretty handsome in my mind, especially the front. The grille works for me, the headlights work for me, the overall lines kind of work for me. The wheelbase actually looks a little short, like the wheels are tucked up under the back seat a little too much. The trunk looks a little too long and a little too low, if I'm being honest. But overall, it's just the most generic car. But it kind of works. It never crosses into classic, but I would say perhaps timeless. All right? But it also never really looks upscale. They leave that to the other divisions. It just works okay. That price, I mean, let's face it. If you offered me a brand new one of these, like here for $10,000, do you want a brand spanking new from the factory, 3-year, 36,000 mile warranty? This? Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I'm not going to go do the conversion from 84 to 2023 and what that money would be like, but yes, something simple and reliable and durable, these absolutely appeal to me. And the mileage, I'll be honest with you, I'm not terribly ashamed at that. I mean, the 17 city, that's kind of painful. My Accord, I don't know, I probably get around 27, 28, something like that. But highway mileage of 28 for a car this size with a V8, that's not bad. Not bad at all.
Our test mileage loop of 21 is twice what the similar Chevy model of a decade ago could have managed. That is progress. And that's not the only place where today's big Chevy has improved. Gone is the marshmallow ride and roller coaster dip and sway of old. Here to stay is a smooth yet controlled posture. While still soft, it displays a decent amount of chassis competence. The Caprice feels more agile than it should for its size. Though it reacts slowly to all steering inputs, it doesn't take long to master even a tight, fast slalom. And if you have to dodge any typical suburban obstacles, such as pets or ash cans or daydreaming drivers, it can be done promptly with no special driver's training. But if you'd rather stop first and swerve later, the typically easy-to-lock-up GM power-assisted braking system will do it in a mostly straight manner. While front-end dive might make you think you'll wind up on the hood, there's no rear-end swing and only a normal amount of disc drum fade. Halts of 141 feet on average from 55 miles per hour were within our acceptable range.
Interesting. So they say gone with the marshmallow ride. I'm very curious to see what they say, if they say anything about the actual ride of the car, because my overwhelming feeling about these cars is that they're soft. But through the slalom, absolutely not a sports sedan, right? BMW is not going to look at this car and be like, oh, hold on a second here. But it looked composed, right? It looked secure. It didn't do anything funny. And for what amounts to the average American family car, that was really good. I'm a little surprised it didn't look a little more yaw and pitch in the movements. Now, the braking is really disappointing. If you've been watching any of these recently, you know I've kind of honed in on 115 is the number. If you do that, it's fantastic. So coming up with this, being at 130, 140 feet, you've got to think that you're cruising along and a kid runs out in front of you. That extra 10, 15, 20 feet really, really matters. And to me, this is cost cutting by GM. There is a way you can do better, but they got it to good enough.
Like the chariots of yesteryear, the interior of this full-size Chevy is wide and plush, with seats that offer thick cushions, if little in extra side or lower back support. Yet head, leg, and shoulder room, which is why you'd buy this car, is ample for 3 adults in the front and 3 more in the rear. The back doors are long and tall for easy entry, and enough knee room is maintained for even oversized backseat drivers. The dash is also a bit of a throwback, with plastic wood side to side. Despite 4 circular instrument cutouts, readouts are limited to engine coolant, speedometer, gas, and a ubiquitous fuel economy indicator. Luggage capacity...
Well, hold on. Let's go back. Ugly interior. All right, it's ugly. I don't want to be too critical of it, but ugly. I mean, certainly we move later to higher quality plastics and more of an eyebrow look, but I do appreciate the fact that they put in circular gauges. They didn't have one of the long speedometers. Fuel economy gauge, give me a break. I don't know if I've ever actually seen a car with one of those in person. Kind of ridiculous, but you know, circular gauges, big eyebrow. But now I'd like to go back and look at the middle part of the instrument panel, right? It was a little pod. That was kind of forward thinking. I think it was very poorly done. Here, I've gone back to it. It's very poorly done. It's very, what is that gap above it? But this idea right here, that's really, really forward thinking of Chevy, actually. I guess what I'm saying here is there is some smart thinking. You may not like this dash, and there's a lot of wasted space everywhere, but there's some forward thinking in this car that GM never quite capitalized on. Let's look at the trunk.
Placement of the spare tire is characteristically huge. Standard power for the Impala Caprice is a 3.8-liter V6 with a 5.7-liter V8 diesel optional, as is the 305 cubic inch 8-cylinder of our car. Accessibility is a mixture of good and bad. Belts are a snap to change, with filter and dipstick locations obvious. Yet the spark plugs can only be easily reached if the car is up on a lift. At least that isn't required but once every 30,000 miles. Given the 3,850-pound tonnage of our four-door, we were pleased at how well the small block V8 automatic combo moved the Caprice along. A 0 to 60 time of 13.9 seconds is normal for a family car. The 4-speed gearbox shifts much more smoothly than other recent GM cars we've tested, and downshifts less frequently. Also less jarring is the locking and unlocking of the torque converter. We judge its 40 to 55 mile per hour passing time of 5.4 seconds, again within our acceptable category.
You know, that this whole car just seems to be falling into acceptable. That 0 to 60 time is slow. I mean, there's no way to beat around the bush. You know, they might say it's acceptable, but come on, that's slow. And so you've got a really heavy car, a down-tuned, strangled engine. I didn't hear them say anything about how much power this thing creates. And it just kind of pulls the car along. It's not a sports sedan, I'm keeping that in mind, but...
But those who want to enjoy big rear drive style will pay some penalty when trying to maneuver in a parking lot. Our Caprice took a full 38 feet of pavement for a curb-to-curb turn. However, that's not bad when you consider a lot of smaller front drive models don't do any better. So the big family car still lives, at least for a while longer. And when their time does come, it's sure to be a sad wake. Replacements for the Caprice and cars like it will be much smaller outside while retaining most of the interior room. But they'll also be more complex to build and service and undoubtedly much more costly to buy. Then the big family car buyer will have a whole new array of choices. But unlike the Chevrolet Caprice Classic, the new versions may never again completely fill those big family car needs.
Well, they were wrong, because there was another generation of the Caprice, which unfortunately, I think GM absolutely, well, just ruined it, honestly. It was just a jelly bean. It was horrible, except for the SS edition. Interesting, because this review shows this car to be everything I thought it was. Heavy, slow, a big engine that doesn't produce a lot of power or a lot of forward thrust. It's more efficient than I thought it was going to be. They were more complimentary of its space than I thought they were going to be. And overall, I don't really love the styling of this car. The need for that big engine means you've got to have a big hood. The rear, the trunk has always looked thin to me and long. Now, it was big with that spare tire in there, but honestly, I would have liked to have seen the trunk thickened up and shortened into something, not bobtail exactly, but something more like that. More efficient use of space, honestly. But I do get this car. I did say at the beginning that I've kind of thought of bigger cars, and certainly my experience with this platform being more of the Buicks, as more premium, more luxury. Why? Getting that big car to have a presence, right? But I do kind of get this car. I don't want to navigate something in the full-size V8 rear-wheel drive 4-speed automatic around my local grocery store parking lot. Why would you do it? But I admit, there's something awesome, and there's something very American about this type of car. The democratization of space, right? Just because you can't afford the Oldsmobile Buick Cadillac, right, or Mercedes BMW, doesn't mean you should be stuffed away in a little penalty box. So maybe you don't need the Buick, but you still want space, you still have your 4 kids, you still want to have a comfortable ride on the interstate and eat up miles, but you want to do so at a fair price. This car fits it perfectly. I get it from that perspective. I think it's absolutely wrong for me. I would love to drive one, but I think it's absolutely wrong for me. But I totally get it. And I think it's something that really has been missed in history and was missed in other countries. The idea that you, not being rich, should be able to have a big car. There's always going to be trade-offs. But this was a really good, big car. Probably not what I would choose, and some of the most generic styling you could imagine. But dang, if you wanted a reliable V8 and a platform that's going to last for 300,000 miles, here you go in a value package. I respect it from that perspective. But I will end with this. Just because of some of you Chevy people out there, I'm not sure the Panther platform wasn't a better one. Let me know what you think below. Thanks for being here, guys.